Good evening, folks. I'd like to call the Town of Cedar Lake Plan Commission June 7, 2023 work session to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Carnahan is absent. Mr. Foreman? Is the button on?
He's trying to talk, I think. John, I think you're trying to talk. We can't hear you, though.
Oh, technicalities. I thought you were talking to Don.
Mr. Foreman, can you hear us now?
Yeah, present.
There you go.
Thank you. Mr. Hunley?
Here.
Ms. Dessauer? Present. Mr. Sharp?
Here.
Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Kapura?
Present.
Mr. Oliphant?
Here.
Mr. Austin?
Present.
Ms. Abernathy? Here. Ms. Heines is present.
Okay, work session. First item, NYBY Development Corp. Preliminary plat for a one-lot subdivision and site plan. Owner petitioner NYBY Development Corp. 1370 Dune Meadows Drive, Porter, Indiana 46304. Vicinity of 9710 West 133rd Avenue, Cedar Lake, Indiana. Petitioner is requesting a preliminary plat for a one-lot subdivision and site plan. I thought they were going for an extension.
That's tomorrow at the BZA.
Oh, that's at the next.
Yeah, that's gonna be tomorrow
All right.
night. So this letter's just an FYI. There was some, portion in it for the plan commission that was the very last paragraph. God, I'm reading it now, sorry.
Hey, hi.
Mr. Chairman, how are you, sir?
Good, thank you.
Good, yes, look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. It's a bit later, so I'll wear a tie to that one, if that's okay. Now it's more official, since this is a work session. Yes, here on behalf of NYBY Development, here with me as well are several of my clients. This is a plan that some of you may be familiar with if you were on the Plan Commission last year. Just brief recitation, this is working in the area of 9710 133rd Avenue. This is a proposed 5,400 square foot building to be operated by MTI Service Center. This is a auto mechanics center. I've got several pictures here that we can show to you. Last year this was submitted on or about February. Thereafter there were 4 BZA approvals for variances for a front side rear setback as well as a variance for a lot size. My understanding that we were attempting to be before you for a preliminary plat last November. However, there was a moratorium that was enacted effective August of last year that was recently lifted. So we are back before you, to familiarize yourselves with this project that has been approved to date. What it is 7 vehicle repair bays. There are 2 12x14 overhead doors, wood frame building brick, veneer, fiber cement, 16 parking spaces, and the reputable local builder Chester Incorporated to construct the building. If it pleases the committee, I can pass out just a couple of pictures which demonstrate, I think, the high quality that this is going to offer into our community. This is a picture of a similarly looking structure that is in Winfield. I can pass these out. My clients have experienced it due to the high quality of the services that they're providing, as well as the location, and that they perceive that there is an opportunity for this building and business to be located here in Cedar Lake as well. And what I'm passing out is a picture of the south elevation of the property as it's proposed to look facing 133rd Avenue. Mr. Parker, here's a copy for you, sir.
Thanks.
This has gone through Mr. Oliphant's review process. We are in receipt of a letter that's dated of August of last year, indicating that from an engineering perspective, there is nothing further for his review, just subject to building regulations as they construct it. And again, communicated with Mr. Oliphant this past week, and he has reiterated in writing that that is the case. So we are here back this evening just to get this back on the burner and we are requesting that we can appear at your public hearing in 2 weeks to seek preliminary plat approval for this exciting new development. And with that, we will entertain any questions for the commission.
The square footage for this site, still, the issue with that still exists, correct?
Not correct, Mr. Parker. So there was a variance that was granted for the square footage in, I believe, August of last year. On August 11 of 2022, there was BZA approval for a variance for lot size.
Is that correct, Mr. Oshner?
That is correct.
If it's in the record, it is.
So, to give you all, he did give a good history, but in June of last year, I can't remember that meeting date off the top of my head, they did receive the first 3 variances that they needed, which was side yard setback and rear yard setback and parking in the front yard. The original petition had been filed for the Plan Commission in February 24th, if I recall correctly, of 2022, which was prior to the ordinance 1402 being adopted by the town. But because no BZA applications had been applied for, then the first BZA application came in April of 2022. It put this petition in 1402, which required that 4th variance for the lot size, because 1402 required the 40,000 square feet versus the 20,000 square feet that is in 496. So they applied for the 4th variance in June of 2022.
Correct.
It was seen in July of 2022, deferred to August, where it then got approval. August 16th of 2022, at a town council meeting, the moratorium was put into place, and May 16th, the moratorium has been lifted, which allows this item to be back on the agenda.
Okay. Ordinance, what is it, 1402?
1402 is the current standing zoning ordinance.
That has been adopted by the town council.
Correct.
That requires 40,000 square feet for a
B3 lot, yes.
for a B3 lot.
You weren't here for any of this. I forgot about that.
No,
This was like, how long were you here? I feel like we talked,
Yeah,
maybe
this
like
is like
that
my
front now.
13th meeting I've
Yeah.
been with the town.
It was a long,
So,
long
yeah, like she said, the original variance passed in June, and then the lot size variance passed in August.
But the lot size was the addition, because that's, it was
Correct.
between all that.
The front, side, and rear yard setbacks were the first ones that got approved in June, and then the lot size one got passed in August.
And if memory serves me correct, the side yard and the rear yard, it was a small issue, and the parking was just a couple of spaces, right?
It was originally, but then there was some kind of state, where originally we thought it was 30 feet, but then some kind of state requirement, it bumped it to 50.
It's an FAU route, so it's
Okay.
50 foot right away, so it actually encompasses.
But the building is not over the setback, it's the front drive of the parking lot that was over it.
Okay. I remembered it was like, it seemed like it was small issue with that.
I just think about all the work that got done on that 133rd corridor to clean it up, get a street in there, make it make sense. And of course, I wasn't here when the zoning ordinance was adopted, but I don't know how the zoning ordinance is any good once a variance is granted to deviate from it first out of the gate. I don't know how that happened, I don't know why it happened, I think it is very poor planning.
Well, when they came initially, though, that wasn't on the table. The overlay.
They started communications with Jill Murr prior to Jill leaving the town back in December of 2021, is when they first started talking with staff members of the town. I was not involved in any of those communications because I didn't take my position until October.
So my first meeting with Jill was October 1st. I had reached of 2021, and we had Marty and I met with her. I had originally reached out to her at the end of September, and then we met with her October 1st.
But the process wasn't completed before the ordinance got adopted, correct?
So all our site plan and everything was submitted before the ordinance passed.
There was actually there's an interesting legal question here. The application was made before the town council approved the ordinance change. There's no need to go into it on the record, but I think legal minds could probably differ in an interesting courtroom. Mr. Osh and I would agree as to whether or not even we could have argued we submitted the application before the zoning ordinance was even changed, so therefore, were we still subject to the existing one-time application? I think that's water under the bridge. As Steph Howard has indicated, I think we went through no less than 5 or 8 meetings with town officials, as well as repeated meetings before this board, as well as the BZA, to approve these variances. And the most significant issue was the question of square footage. I believe, as Ms. Abernathy has indicated, now 40,000 is the square foot in order to put a building like this in, but at no point in time has the square footage of this building ever violated the past code or the existing code.
Well, there's been a significant amount of discussion here very recently about other people who own B3 parcels and what they would have to do to develop those B3 parcels. And in my mind, I don't see a difference in that. It looks to me like the amount of property needs to be acquired to meet the zoning ordinance, the way the zoning ordinance exists, because the zoning ordinance got passed in the midst of this.
And it did. There's no doubt about that, Mr. Parker, and that's where the variance was applied for. Variance is in essence an addition or amendment to the existing ordinance that's out there, and the ordinance that was passed in August of 2022 indicated that 23,000 and some square feet was sufficient for the variance that was granted.
But to be clear, again, those were already granted by the BZA.
Already.
So that's
Correct.
old news at this point.
Correct.
Side yard, rear yard, parking, and then the lot size.
Correct, yeah. So the purpose this evening is to push the project forward to the next stage for site plan approval.
I'm good to this. Is this a combination body shop and auto repair shop?
Just auto repair. And all vehicles will be put in the building at the end of the night. You won't see vehicles outside. You know, he runs a clean shop. If you want to see a similar site that you could look at is Winfield location on Randolph Street in Winfield.
I think we had this conversation before. I mean, I've actually been out to Winfield. I've seen your shop out there. You're right, it's clean. We were never opposed to the building, or I wasn't anyways. I don't want to speak for everyone. It's just gets muddy with the location and what we're trying to do, I think, on 133rd and...
Mr. Austin, do you have any thoughts on this? This is on the agenda for tomorrow night as well, isn't it?
It is, and all approvals would be recommended or advised to be made with all of the land use approvals required to be approved, so that all of the items that are open are connected or collected to this project.
Well, isn't this kind of the cart before the horse? Shouldn't that meeting be had and that decision be made before we move forward tonight on anything?
Well, this is a work study, so we're getting the work study introduction and discussion. This will be in front of you, I believe, in 2 weeks. So, catching up, this could hardly be described really, even in an academic book.
Yeah.
As to how the sequence of things occurred and didn't occur, and I would suggest that this could be a discussion of clean hands, unclean hands, and everybody's got both, I think.
Tomorrow night is just gonna be about extending the approvals because it's getting close to
The extension of deadlines, right?
the deadline. So we're not gonna be discussing tomorrow night, or the BZA won't be discussing anything as far as approvals or non-approvals or what have you. It's just, will we or won't we extend?
Well, I hope to God we don't get another explanation of it. We're at about, what, 5 or 6 of them? Maybe more.
Yeah, but that's all tomorrow's about.
That's not tomorrow night, right? That'll be in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
You'll have
Somebody
a
said
public
tomorrow.
meeting.
All right, in 2 weeks. So tonight, we just want to figure out what to do with the undersized lot right now.
Well, you're not gonna figure anything out by record making. You're gonna have a bit of discussion here, I presume. or maybe not. It might be saved for the public meeting coming up in 2 weeks, where some action requests will be made, I'm certain. And you might or you might not do that.
Will this be a Napa store also, as the one in Winfield is?
Yes.
Okay, okay. All yours are?
Yeah, all five of them
Okay,
are bottom
okay,
there, yeah.
okay.
For the life of me, I don't understand how this got like this. My position is the same as it's been from the beginning, though. That zoning ordinance, all the effort, time that went into that, the 133rd corridor, all the effort, time, work, and money that went into that, I just think that this is, and if it wasn't the will of the town council and everybody that worked on that zoning ordinance, then they shouldn't have passed the zoning ordinance, in my view. So, I find this to be incredibly frustrating. I'm sure it is for you guys too, but I find it to be incredibly frustrating that after all the work that went into the zoning ordinance and that corridor, that first thing out of the box, we do variances away from that zoning ordinance, which anybody that, and Nathan, you know this too, and anybody walks in here after that is gonna say, well, you already did it,
Well,
so.
I think, Mr. Parker, I appreciate that comment. Having sat for 10 years on that side, anyone in city planning would say the time to have started city planning was 10 years ago. But oftentimes you don't have the hindsight of that 10 years ago as to where something's going to go. And suddenly you're dealing with deadlines. And that's what we were dealing with in this particular instance. Perhaps there've been discussions to modify the corridor overlay, but it wasn't in place yet. And my clients were able to submit a proposal before that happened. And not only that, but with the change that was made, variances were granted to enable them to continue there. And I'm confident with the design of the structure, with the high-end quality look that it brings, I think it still meets the desired goal is that's where we want to shift this corridor.
It also sets a precedent to deviate from the zoning ordinance going forward for whatever it is for the next thing that comes here. And that is a fact. No matter if it's a quality item or not, the next person that comes in here is gonna argue this precedent immediately.
Sure, and they can certainly try, and that's where each one stands on its own, and there's unique decisions to be made, and I haven't gone back and looked at the record, but I'm sure there's in the record specificity as to why this was approved, and folks may be able to differentiate.
I don't think there was a lot of specificity, and I don't think that there was a hardship proven when the BZA approved that, and that's my view of it. And I still think that's my view of it. So, I'm not trying, there's things that have happened here in the past for a reason, and I just think deviating from that and setting a precedent away from that is not beneficial to the town and the community going forward.
No problem with that.
Those are my thoughts.
I understand.
I wasn't here when the zoning ordinance was passed, and it wasn't my thoughts to pass the zoning ordinance, but in my view now, that's the guideline that we should be going by.
Sure, no, and I can appreciate, like I said, there's time frames, different views of city planning, town planning, so. Is there any other questions in regards to site plan development? If not, Mr. Chairman, would request that we can meet you again in 2 weeks for public hearing for site plan approval.
Okay, do we have any other discussion from the commissioners?
I believe that they applied before that new zoning ordinance went in. I think it looks like a decent building.
If there's no more discussion, then, yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the Planning Commission. Appreciate it.
Ashley, can you come here and put my computer back on, whatever, please? Five seconds. Thank you. Number 2, Obadiah Taylor, vacation of subdivision. Owner petitioner Michael and Nancy Shander, 3452 Sally Drive, Stager, Illinois, 60475, and Bats Enterprises LLC, 7329 McConnell Avenue, Lowell, Indiana, 46356. Vicinity of 13221 Colfax Street, 13131 Colfax Street, 13137 Colfax, and 13177 Colfax Street, Cedar Lake, Indiana. Petitioners are requesting a vacation of the Obadiah Taylor subdivision. Do we have a petitioner here?
I do not see him. I sent them a letter well over 2 weeks ago. I've received no communication. I've heard nothing additional. I even asked them if that they were withdrawing this petition and not going forward to please contact me so I could advise you guys, the Plan Commission, that they are not currently seeking to do the vacation at this time. I do know in anticipation of them potentially being here tonight, I had talked with Chris about this briefly and had a recommendation ready to go in case they were here, but again, I don't see them.
There's nobody on Zoom either.
Mr. President, at the risk of being repetitive, I think in another meeting a month or two ago, I recommended this be removed from the agenda. You felt otherwise, and that's fine. The request in itself is problematic in my opinion. They request a vacation of the subdivision. Now, what they're looking for, in my understanding, was to be able to do some construction, full permit, building. The most appropriate way in my mind, and there are different ways to do everything, right, would be a replat and take this into a one-lot subdivision versus vacating what was a meets and bounds property, kind of go backwards. So it would be my recommendation if it came out. I think I put it in writing, maybe to Ashley and Chris. I don't remember. It's been on the agenda for a couple of months. If they were to present this or stand up and ask for this to continue, that would be my recommendation to this, that the least effective and least efficient method of doing what they wanted to do for end use, and kind of defeats our lot of record and practice of requiring that for building permit and construction purposes. So even if they showed up, that would be my recommendation. They're not here again. I think it's the third meeting, isn't it?
That is correct. They were first on in the March meeting, were invited back to the April, didn't show up at April, was back on the agenda in May, weren't here in May. You requested I reach out again. I sent the letter, didn't hear anything, and once again, they're not present.
I agree with Mr. Austin that this has gone on long enough, and they haven't been here like 6 weeks, 3 meetings, and no response to your replies on that. And I also agree that vacating this and going back, and you're stepping back in time as opposed to moving on into the future. So
Can it just be removed from the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, I would suggest that we remove it. Can we do it tonight, or do we have to wait till next week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Well, then I would suggest that in 2 weeks, if they're not here, we remove it from the agenda.
Well, they're not on the agenda for 2 weeks from now, right?
Well,
We can just remove it in 2 weeks?
it's never been publicly advertised because, at the first meeting of Heard Up, there was discussion that was had about what they could potentially do. They talked about coming back to the next work session, so then it was deferred to the next work session. So no public advertisement has ever been made for this item,
So we can just
for
remove
this
it.
petition, so it's never moved to the public.
Wasn't it on the public meeting agenda though, your regular public meeting agenda 3 months ago?
No.
So it's only been on the work study?
Yep, this has only ever been on the work
You're right.
session.
It can be removed.
It could be removed then?
It can.
Tonight?
Yes.
My recommendation is to remove it.
It is removed. I will send them a letter advising them that due to their lack of attendance, the item has been removed, and if they would like to get back in front of the plan commission, they will need to file a new petition.
We lawyers call that failure to prosecute. Jack, do you have anything to do with this? You or your firm?
Can't we do them in a work session?
Yeah, but they were not on public meeting.
Survey may know something, but I don't.
No. Another surveyor did the original plat.
What was that?
Another surveyor did the original plat.
Okay, so,
Like the one of the guys that's in here.
Glenn Crack did it.
other Glenn.
Heather Glenn.
Okay. Number 3, Yonks Way resub, 2-lot subdivision. Owner petitioner L&L Capital Assets LLC, P.O. Box 2010, Cedar Lake, Indiana, 46303, vicinity of 13310 West 133rd Avenue, Cedar Lake. Petitioner is requesting a preliminary plat for a 2-lot subdivision.
Good evening. My name is Jack Hulse. I'm with DVG, representing the petitioner this evening. Eric with L&L is also in the room. So if you have any questions, you can specifically for him, you can direct them to him. Eric has been in front of you at a work study level over the last couple of months, seeking some input from you as to what he would like to do with the property and what you would like to see as a result of that. And at that last meeting, there was seemed to be favorable recommendation that there would be a 2-lot subdivision in an R2 district. Since then, we've been employed or been contracted to do some engineering and some survey work. Had some conversations with Ashley regarding the project, and if you have the subdivision in front of you, I'd like to go over a couple of matters.
I thought this all got resolved, no?
What was that?
I thought this all got resolved and was going to a PUD. It didn't get resolved?
I don't think
It was determined, one of the last couple times that Jack and I talked, they're going to leave it remaining as an R1 zoning, and they're gonna be seeking 4 variances, more or less, tomorrow night from the BZA to allow for, reduction in lot, or setback lines, more or less. So they're gonna leave the zoning as the R1, which was the preference of the plan commission, and just looking at subdividing it into 2 lots.
Yeah, so a lot of the previous conversations were related to multifamily use of this parcel, and that has been, kind of got the feedback pretty clearly that that was not desired by the Plan Commission. So looking at single-family uses on this parcel, we'd like to do 2 single-family lots. So then we began to look at the zoning code and see whether or not an R1 or an R2 district would make sense here. It's currently zoned R1. And in discussion with Ashley, the number of variances and the types of variances that would be needed would be the same no matter the zoning classification, whether it was R1 or whether it was R2. So the decision was made by the client and us to not seek that rezone, because why would we want to do a rezone and then immediately be in front of you and ask for variances? That is generally not looked favorably upon.
Makes sense.
So we're seeking variances tomorrow night. We're on the agenda for that, in which we'll be seeking lot width and some side yard setbacks. And I have them listed on the primary plat for you if you want to see them. So in note number 8, so a reduction in the side yard, the current is 30. We're going to ask for a reduction in 20 to 20 feet. That was previously granted when this is a 1-lot subdivision. So about
2020?
2 years ago, the previous owner of this parcel wanted to build a home on the parcel, and this was a meets and bounds, so he did a 1-lot subdivision, and waivers, actually is what they're called, development waivers granted from this board for detention, for public road improvements, public sidewalk improvements, drainage improvements, those kinds of things that you would typically see with a one-lot subdivision. So this is technically a re-subdivision. We're taking that one lot and would like to make 2 lots out of it. And as part of that one-lot subdivision, there were variances granted because of the steep side slope for the house to be placed as far back on the lot as possible, as far south on the lot. So we're asking for variances. We'll be asking tomorrow for variances to basically mirror those same types of requests that were already made. So we're also asking side yards to be reduced to 8 foot. That would match the R2 zone. You do have minimum lot sizes in the R1 zone, and we're asking for reductions in those. And then
What's the reduction of that?
what was that?
What's the reduction?
So in R1 on a corner lot, it's 16,500 square feet is required. We're requesting that to be reduced down to 12,500. And in a regular lot, it's 15,000 square feet, and we're asking that to go down to 12,000. And reduction of the lot width in your zoning code says 100 feet for a corner lot and 90 feet for a regular lot, and we're asking to go down to 80 and 75 respectively. And we understand that this type of request would naturally include some public improvements. So we are proposing to make improvements to the road. We're going to be putting curb and gutter on the frontage of the lot. So we have frontage on the north and on the east. And anytime you put curb on a road, that many times requires drainage structures to be put in. So have included drainage structures, 2 of them in 133rd. Currently, there's a 6-inch ductile pipe. I actually met Don at the site and went over some of the challenges that we have out there. But we're proposing to install drainage structures that would be appropriate for the area and utilize existing right-of-way to take that drainage. And then we're proposing that we would also install sidewalk when the homes were constructed, which is very typical with new construction, that the sidewalk is put in by the builder when they're building that house. So that's what we're requesting to be heard in 2 weeks, is to hear this petition. We understand that this is dependent on action from the BZA tomorrow, so we're hopeful in that regard. We hope that this is consistent with what you would like to see, and that there's single family being proposed for use on this property. We're asking for consideration because of the proximity to the tracks and also the steep slope. There's like 20 feet of fall from the west side to the east side, and the road is on the east side. So generally in your home construction, you like to see the back of the house fall off, so you can have nice, beautiful walkouts. And in this case, the backyard is the highest part of the ground, so that's a pretty big challenge for this site. And then having that also be the tracks. So it's just consideration that we're asking for. Is there any questions that anyone has?
I mean, both of the lots are gonna have a greater square footage than is required in a pre-platted subdivision right now.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes, they're full 12,000 square feet. The interior lot will be 12,193. The exterior will be 12,787.
I didn't.
Yeah, the R2 requires 12.5 and for corner and 10 for an interior, so if they still would have needed all the setbacks. The only variance that they had saved on had been lot size, more or less.
I don't think the setbacks, I don't think that that's I don't think it's an issue for that area. For me, it's not anyway.
I think it'd be a good fit.
Yeah, we've also taken the opportunity over the course of time to engage the various, landowners around us. So we have actually M1 use north of us, and we have, residential properties on the east side across the road and directly adjacent to the south. Taking the opportunity to talk with each one of those, and, we feel that they're all in favor. I do have, some type of written proof that I can give to you, but I'd rather we have something more formal that we can maybe enter into the record at the public hearing regarding that. We also did submit engineering plans on this, and Don has written a review in which I believe there's a recommendation. We did miss the zoning classification on the north and a couple of things that we need to pick up on the primary plat. I think we're set for 2 weeks. We'll see what the BZA says tomorrow. But
2 weeks good?
Yeah, we issued our letter on the 1st. Jack's right, fairly minor comments, similar waivers to the last subdivision of stormwater detention, park dedication, typical tree placement, stuff like that. Cleaning up some of the addressing, I think, but yeah, come final plat, this will likely require some type of performance letter of credit for the curbs. Well, sidewalks probably gonna be tied to the building permit, but there will be some drainage improvements as well.
Yep.
So we will deal with that when the time comes, but the preliminary plat, we're in good shape.
Building department have anything?
We all reviewed it today, and none of them had any comments regarding it.
Yeah, I think it was pretty much discussed previously, so. Yeah, if there's no other discussion, then we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Number 4, Lakeside South concept plans. Owner Cedar Lake 133 LLC, 8900 Wicker Avenue, St. John, Indiana, 46373. Petitioner Showing Development, 8900 Wicker Avenue, St. John, Indiana, 46373. Vicinity of 5604 West 141st Avenue, Cedar Lake, Indiana. Petitioner is presenting a concept plan for Lakeside South and discuss rezoning the property to a PUD.
Good evening, Jack Slager with Schilling Development, representing Cedar Lake 133 and the Lakeside Development. I know these drawings were hot off the press yesterday, so I don't know, do they have them?
They do not.
Okay.
Just so they have a comparison, they do have the last concept plan brought in front of them.
I got it this afternoon. I'm gonna have it, yeah, did get it. You guys want one to follow?
So while I've got you this evening, I wanted to bring you up to speed on what we'll call Lakeside Original before we start talking about Lakeside South. Lakeside Original, if you recall, we developed Unit 1 back in 2017 and 2018. We came in 2019 and received approval on the balance of the original 80-acre site. We developed the first 54 lots, and we're waiting for additional water capacity on the east side of town. That water capacity is now there and adequate. The water tower is nearing completion, the new water line, the new wells, everything's coming together. So it looks like we are going to begin to restart the development this fall and potentially put in another 50 to 55 lots as what we'll call Unit 2, Block 1. So just to make you all aware of that, that likely will be in the works, and you'll start to see some activity out there. We'll basically be restarting the original Lakeside development. What I really wanted to come here tonight to talk about was Lakeside South, and to refresh your memory, for those of you that were here, or some of you maybe were not, we came in September of last year with a concept plan for the 200 acres that is Lakeside South, and at that time we had proposed approximately 600 units of 3 different products: cottage homes, paired villas, and single-family lots. We received some feedback from the Plan Commission at that time. We talked about a number of different things, but since September we've done a number of different things with the property. We've been researching and working with our land planners and our landscape architect and the builders that are going to be a part of this development. Well, let me back up a minute. This parcel was annexed into the town last year, but there was a 4-acre strip that was acquired later that needed to be annexed, and that was actually approved last night at the town council. So the final piece of the puzzle was approved for annexation last night. That now goes through a public notice period and then a 30-day waiting period, but it's basically we're completing the final annexation of all the parcels. So we now have 220 acres altogether on this property, and it's currently zoned agricultural, so we basically have a clean slate that we're starting with. Last September, we presented a plan showing 300 units with 3 product types, and since then, we've been working with our land planners. We're coming back tonight with the revised version, which is now down from 600 units to 550 units, and we have 5 product types. So we've increased the amount of single-family lots, we've decreased the amount of paired villas, we've increased the amount of open space. We're trying to preserve the little bit of natural trees that are on the site. We split the original large detention area. There was 1 large lake in the middle of the property. We've now split that into 2 smaller lakes so that we can just kind of break up some of the open spaces so it doesn't seem quite so dense. The entrance is still shown as before, heavily bermed and landscaped coming in off 141st. We have a park with some playground equipment near the entrance. And really the key component that we've kept through both of these designs is what we call a linear park, which is a paved walking and bike path that goes all the way from the east side of the property through the project, around the lakes, and all the way to the west side of the property. And our west boundary is the Founder's Creek, and we know that the town has plans for a nice trail along Founder's Creek. I believe you actually received some funding for that for maybe 2028, which is fantastic. So ultimately, the residents of this development will have the ability to potentially take a trail from here to Lemon Lake or from here to Cedar Lake, the frontage, the lake. So those are cool things. So the new plan with the 5 products, as we work back and forth with the builders, we have a mix of some 60-foot lots, some 70-foot lots. The majority are 80-foot lots, and then, of course, the paired villas are the 90-foot lots. Some of this product, the 60-foot lots, will be maintenance-free, as will the paired villas, maintenance-free, meaning snow removal, lawn care will be included. And so the 70-foot lots would have the ability to have those same units, potentially with larger and/or 3-car garages. Well, when we did Beacon Point, this would be a similar product to what we did at Beacon Point, and we've always called them cottage homes. We've kind of gotten away from calling them cottage homes because they're really not cottages. They're single-family homes. They've just become they're 16, 17, 1,800 square feet. Some of them have basements. People are putting on sunrooms and covered porches, and now we have the ability to do some with 3-car garages. So you're essentially just having a maintenance-free single-family home. We'll continue to control the high architectural standards, ensure the variety and high values within the subdivision. We can talk about values of these different units, but we went over that a little bit last time. So a couple of the challenges that we have with this site, it's relatively flat to start with. It's got very little character, very little trees. We're gonna end up moving a lot of dirt to dig these lakes. We're gonna end up planting thousands of trees out there. The original challenge with this site was that it has no municipal water or municipal sewer available to it. And so, along those lines, we are going to be running a 1 mile sewer all the way out to Moore Street. We're going to tie into your main trunk line sewer on Moore Street, and we're going to run a mile of sewer through the site. Basically, it gets all the way up to the original Lakeside. And then, in the meantime, the town has run the water line from the new wells at the lighthouse down 141st to our southwest corner of our property, and we will be taking that 12-inch water line, continuing down 141st through our site, through Lakeside, and ultimately it will tie back to the new water tower up in Lem Lake. So those are some nice things that will be coming together with this project. Due to the size of the project, it will take approximately 6 to 8 years to develop and probably at least 10 years to build out. We originally had asked for a density on this site when we were looking at 600 units the first time. We were showing a density of about 2.7 units per acre. Now that we've lowered it to 550 on 220 acres, it comes out to exactly 2.5 units per acre, which is actually exactly what we had in the original Lakeside single-family section, was 2.5 units per acre. So even though we've got some clustered density, we're trying to insert a lot of green space, the walking trails, preserving this nice clump of trees that's right here along 141st, the park, some other areas. And so we're ending up at 2.5 units per acre. Other than that, just wanted to talk a little bit about what makes us different. We're only a land developer. We don't do any of the building ourselves. We're primarily a material supplier, but we also develop lots and work with multiple builders. We hand select the builders based on who we think will build the best units for each of these products. And we create strong covenants for the whole development that require high architectural standards and high quality construction. And then we create strong homeowners associations to maintain the common areas and enforce the covenants. We have a homeowners association already established in Lakeside. We will continue that association throughout Lakeside South. So it'll be a well-funded association that will take care of the entrances, the ponds, the paths, and all the common areas. So for this project to come to fruition, we will be requesting a PUD zoning, and we would work with the town on what that looks like. Obviously, it's going to be a substantial set of rules that blends kind of our covenants with the town's ordinances and comes up with a PUD ordinance and commitment. And so we would like to move towards the zoning to a PUD without actually completing full engineering on the entire 550 lot development. And so I think the Plan Commission's role in that is, at some point when you're comfortable with the project, would be a recommendation to the town council for the rezone. But other than that, I have a bunch more information. I don't want to bore you with all the financials of it, but if you guys have specific questions regarding the project, I'd be glad to answer them.
They find water with a new well.
The new well being the one over by the lighthouse right here, that one apparently has very good water.
There's another one too, Jim.
So, yeah, it's my understanding the east side water system is in good shape, or will be.
Will be.
The only, in and out is through the original subdivision?
So we'll tie in on the main drive coming in and out of the original subdivision. We'll have a main entrance on 141st to the south, and we're providing a future road connection out to Cedar Lake Road, which is just cut off of the drawing right here.
On the east side?
On the east side, right, and then there's also a road stub up here at the north end, also a future road connection, would go out to Cedar Lake Road. So you've got the potential to have 4 connections. Also, one thing I should mention, when we make, going back to my original statement, but when we make our next phase of Lakeside Original, we will be making this connection of 135th Place to Robin's Nest. So Robin's Nest has existed for however long, 20 years with their single entrance. Lakeside has existed so far with its single entrance. We're now connecting the 2 developments, so we're really not encouraging traffic between the 2. We'll end up posting signs that say no construction traffic going through Robin's Nest, but essentially if there was ever an emergency, you now have the connection between Robin's Nest and Lakeside where they each have an emergency access point, essentially.
If memory serves me correctly, though, you don't own that land. You didn't originally, where it says the future road connection, you didn't own that land previously, correct?
On
Both.
here?
Yeah.
That's correct. No, we don't own either one of these, but they're farms they'll be developed at some point. Yeah.
We had a concern when you were in, many moons ago, about traffic flow or traffic in the area. And was anything done about that as far as the study or?
Well, we've talked about that, and DVG, Jack Hulls, they have the ability to put a study together. In order to do that study, we need to be comfortable with the design and the number to put forth the traffic study. So if we had done it 6 months ago, we would have been looking at 600. Now we're looking at 550. But we can put that together. Obviously, we're looking at which direction all the traffic's going to go, north, south, east, west. And again, it's over a 8 to 10 year period as this thing develops out. So.
Are you saying, so for you guys to feel comfortable with the number, or you want to gauge if we're comfortable with the number?
I'm trying to gauge if you're comfortable with the number.
I'm not comfortable with the number. That's just me. So I'll just speak up and say that. I don't know how our town right now could support this type of development. I just don't. Driving the roads every day as I do and seeing the condition and the traffic already, I just don't know.
Well, and that's the hurdle that we have. Obviously, it's a big number, but we're trying to master plan a development that is going to come in stages and pieces over a number of years. So, you know, we've talked about this, like we could break this up and say, hey, we're going to come in with 50 lots, and sounds good, everybody's comfortable.
Where would you start, Jack? Do you know yet?
Yeah, we would start at the entrance on 141st, and we would likely do a small pod of each type of lot. So we'd have to dig this big pond right in the middle, and we'd have some single family, we'd have some 60s, some 70s, some paired villas, and so we'd have a little sampling of each, maybe 10 or 20 lots of each style, in order just to get the momentum, get the subdivision started. So ideally, that would be next year.
So ideally, you want approval quickly, right, relatively quickly? So do you
Well,
start next year?
Yeah, I mean, our goal would be to work through the approval process through the rest of this year and potentially be able to start next year. The one thing, I know it's complicated to think of all these moving pieces, but as we look to restart the development of Lakeside Original, in order to do that, we need to run that sewer line all the way from Morse to get to Lakeside. So we need to run that mile-long sewer line. We need to know where that's gonna go. Right now, we have an easement through the woods, and then we're gonna come out here, we're gonna go through the middle of a cornfield. Ideally, it's gonna go down where there's gonna be a future road and future lots someday. And that hinges on ultimately the general approval of a layout similar to this, so we know that we're putting that sewer in the right place. And then along with those lines, same thing with the water line, that the town has run here to our property and needs to get up to Lakeside. Same thing, we gotta run that water line through this cornfield, and we're not gonna just make a straight line, but we're gonna put it where the road's gonna be, so that someday it can be utilized. So that's why we're here to start talking about this. I'm not looking for approval next month or whatever, but I wanna start the conversation.
Well, one of my biggest concerns is traffic. And with all this stuff that's potentially not on the books yet, but talked about and rumored about and that, and then this 550 units, and everything else going on in town, you still have to complete, your Beacon Point West and Hopewell has some stuff there, and they're talking a big, multi-family type deal in there in Centennial, so traffic comes into the big play here.
Sure.
So I definitely am concerned about that. The other thing is, I don't like 60-foot wide lots. I like bigger lots.
That's my biggest problem.
I mean, sure, you're getting, more bang for your buck, but it's smaller the lot. But the lots are deep, 135, which is nice, but I think 60 is a little shy.
Yeah.
And I think we should look at something bigger, in that respect.
So we started, original Beacon Point, we started with 56-foot wide lots with 6-foot side yards. And after we did the first phase, everybody felt like that was probably a little tight. Since then, we've gone to the 60-foot, and every one of these lots, sizes 60, 70, 80, they all have 8-foot side yards. So we're going to a minimum 8-foot side yard. Many of them will be more, but they have a nice unit that's either 40 or 42 feet wide that fits on a 60-foot lot. Gives you 8 to 9 feet of side yard on each side. The key to the 60-foot lot is the maintenance-free and having the association take care of the lawn and the irrigation, the snow removal. So as that lot gets bigger, it becomes more and more expensive to do that, and the dues, the monthly dues and the association fees and everything become higher. So the 60-foot is a nice size lot that fits that unit and gets us essentially the density that we're looking for. So, I keep going back to that 2.5 number, which we were able to, that's exactly what we had here, 2.5 units per acre. I did an experiment, and this was just for our benefit, to take the same parcel and lay it out with a grid pattern, and this is, unfortunately, we'll see other developers do this kind of layout. This is a little bit like Lynn's Way, just grid, everything straight, east-west streets, long, straight. This is the most inexpensive way to develop. And I laid this out in an R2, a standard R2, 80 by 125 lot. And this is what we can do, and we get 530 units on this site with standard 80 by 125 lot. So it can be done. We don't want to develop it this way, but other people might. So that we're looking for a little bit of concession for some creativity on lot sizes so that we have different products. And in return, we're willing to replace that with green space, walking trails, ponds, landscaping, things of that nature. But overall, the density is the same.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Jack, what is the size of the cottage home lots in Monastery Woods South? Are those 60 or 70?
That's a good question. I think Don's going to look them up right now. They varied because those were originally townhome lots that were re-subdivided.
52 and 50.
50 and 52.
Yep.
Okay,
Those are really tight.
yeah, those are tight.
They were originally set up to be townhomes, and then they were re-subdivided into cottage homes, but, so, yeah, we've come a long way since then. But
And one other question,
Yeah, go
Heather texted me a picture of the layout. To the west, does that, where it's like green space with walking trail connecting, down to the Founder's Creek Trail, does that all drop off quite a lot, that land?
Yes,
Okay,
for sure.
thank you.
Yep, a lot of those lots on the west side would be walkout lots. That detention, that linear detention along Founder's Creek is low. Yeah, and then obviously it drops way down to the creek there.
Yeah, I mean, with this subdivision being on the furthest east point of our community, I suspect the majority of the people are gonna hightail it to I-65 to go north or south to work, right? There's more and more Illinois organizations moving up to that Maribel over corridor, so. And over the recent months, I've just come to realize how many tens of thousands of people just sit on their chairs and play with Facebook. It's unbelievable how many people don't care about outside yards and things like that, so, those are some of my comments, that's all I've got.
Yeah, and we're not opposed to doing traffic study. I think that probably is the next step for us. We'd like to know too, where is all the traffic going when it leaves here? So, we'll start that process. They'll be able to figure out which way everybody's going.
And that all impacts the cost to the town for, widening roads or
Yeah.
repairs or
Absolutely.
lights or what have you, because, pretty soon, Lakeshore Drive is gonna be a series of lights or roundabouts.
Well, and I ran these numbers, just FYI, and I know, again, the size of the development is scary to a lot of people just because it's so big, but we're trying to master plan something nice. Assuming 550 units, the total to the town in building permits is $7.3 million in building permits. Some of that is system development charges, some is park impact fees. The infrastructure cost that we're looking at in terms of roads and sewers that we're putting in is about $33 million. $33 million, the inspection fees at 3% is basically $1 million in inspection fees. The property taxes generated by this development when it's fully developed annually to the town is approximately $2.5 million. And the increased valuation to the town of Cedar Lake, long-term when the development is done, is $220 million in increased valuation to the town of Cedar Lake. So, all those
Some of
factors.
those costs you just cited, Jack, with all due respect, are just the cost of you doing business. You have to have these things in your development.
Sure.
To have the development.
Right.
When you're talking about, and I think what John was touching on before, when you're talking about traffic and conveying traffic from your development to wherever it goes in the morning and comes back every day, I think that's what's given a lot of folks heartburn in town currently, because if you drive the same commute every day, and you keep getting 15, and it's not just here, it's everywhere, you get 15 or 20 minutes added to it in every community that you have to drive through, it starts to drive you a little insane.
Yep.
You know, if you work 40 minutes away, and you're spending 2 hours on the road every day, commuting, and we can't convey traffic out of this community to support the population here, and there's no plan to get that done, people become a little frustrated really quickly.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
You know, so.
And I would say you guys are doing a great job in terms of improving your roads, keeping up with it so far. I was trying to relay some of the fees that will be coming into the town that ultimately will be used to enhance some of those roads. Whatever roads we don't end up doing long-term, that there's a benefit to the town in terms of tax revenue, increased valuation, building permit revenue, all of that revenue coming to the town that can be used for some of these improvements. Where it may not be on this side, it might be on the other side of town, I don't know. But without the growth, the dollars aren't there to do it, so.
Yeah, at some point though, and I feel like that's almost become the atmosphere, everybody sees figures and they don't see reality anymore. And, there needs to be a balance between both. And I agree with John about, I don't like the 60-foot lots. And I guess one of the questions I'd like to ask you, is there any way to make this less dense and keep it aesthetically pleasing for your marketing?
From a financial standpoint, no. I mean, we've done the math. We came in with 600 lots originally, and we were like, yeah, we like this plan. The town didn't like it. We've cut back 50 lots, where it was almost 10%. I think we're at where we can be at to make this thing work. We have $1.5 million sewer line to come in. We've got $1 million water line to run through the property. And so we've got some hardships on us that we're trying to balance the density to be able to make that happen. You know, I think the town has spent a great deal of time and money already, not just your roads, but investing in your water system for this side of town, the water line, the water tower. So you guys are investing in that stuff, I would assume, with the hopes that the growth will follow. So here we are with the growth that's coming from the improvements that you're putting in. So we think this is a natural fit. I think a density of 2.5 is more than reasonable when, if you're talking about a high-density development, you're talking 5, 6, 7 units per acre. I've done a survey of what some of the other developments are in terms of density. We have a lot of developments in town that are a lot higher density than this.
Some of those were approved long ago, and you
Sure.
guys and we were stuck with them.
Yeah.
But going forward, I think everybody's just gonna have to make a decision on what they wanna be stuck with.
Like, but Lisa,
Mr. Chairman, I have another question.
School system too.
Just a minute, John.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, this is Crown Point Schools. They're aware of it. I mean, they've been aware of it. We've been talking about it for a couple of years already. Obviously, they're already improving MacArthur School in preparation for some of this growth, but they're pouring money into all their schools too.
Okay, John.
Okay, great. So 60 by, the 135, 8,100 square foot per lot. So my question is this, Jack. Does the HOA and POA restrict people from putting a pool in? Because now with 135-foot deep lots, I would suspect some people in the future are gonna ask, hey, can I put my own pool in the back? What's the story with these types of subdivisions with HOAs?
Yeah, on those maintenance-free, the smaller lots, they are restricted, no pools, no fences, no sheds. I mean, the idea is when they come in with their maintenance crews to mow the grass, they're doing the whole block all at once. So, it keeps it clean. Yeah, and so there would be no pools on those particular lots.
Got it, thanks.
Which lots can have pools?
The single families, all of the 80s, I guess we'd have to decide if the 70s, if we'd want to have pools on the 70-footers, but the 80-foot lots on this side, and we divided that up into two sections. There's a slightly lighter shade and a slightly darker shade of orange, if you call it orange. So we would have two different products on the 80-foot lots. You know, one would be maybe the standard housing, and one would be an upgraded version of that. So again, I don't want to get too hung up on the 60-foot lots, but we're trying to increase the value and the quality of the homes. We could make the whole thing 80-foot lots and just say, build whatever you want. But ultimately, the town wants better quality construction, and that's what we bring. You've dealt with Lennar, and you see what they bring.
You could bring better quality construction on a 70 or 80-foot lot too.
Yep, you could.
So, you know, your task here is to go back to the drawing board and see how you can expand those 60-foot lots. And not like Monastery, where you expanded it from 56 to 60 and gave them all 4 extra feet. See if you can get that 60 to, say, at least 70. I mean, we're in the talking stage here. Our concept is bigger lots. at least on the 60-foot wide ones.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you obviously have done some thinking about this in your team's plan. This was not originally going to be a PUD, if my memory is correct. It was going to be a flat-out subdivision. You are aware our ordinance 1402 has a development plan or PUD agreement component to it. Probably us getting the bullets, maybe not the brain surgery, but the bullets of what you're proposing would be important, so we can begin putting our arms around it while you're looking at it also.
Okay.
I know, you're well prepared, you got a lot of notes, you got a lot of game plan. And that'll end up in the PUD agreement, which will be part of the PUD ordinance.
Right, good. Well, yeah, and that'll be our next step, would be to start hashing out those PUD guidelines that everybody can see what that looks like. What we're proposing in terms of quality, level of housing, size restrictions, material restrictions, landscape restrictions, trying to bring an elevated product to these properties.
We'll be looking for the utility stuff also very, very carefully. And one of the things that was mentioned here tonight about roads and infrastructure probably seems to make sense to us from a town perspective. We have 141st Avenue, which is, somebody mentioned about the gateway out of town, Greg did. And we've got to do some thinking about that. There's a lot of traffic going to be born on that road.
There's only so many ways to get out of town.
Yeah.
And I've tried to investigate every one of them. There's just no good way to do it anymore.
And we've got some studying to do about that ourselves as a town.
I won't be laying on my deathbed, Jack, thinking that I wish I'd have spent more time on the road, you know?
No, I get it. I know when you,
Yeah, wishing the ambulance.
when you have to drive south to go north, I understand that.
We need to work from home.
Mr. President, if I may, just a couple of quick comments. Our comprehensive plan does call for a low density being anything under 3, so by coming in at a 2.5, they are technically meeting our low density requirements. They met that technically with the 2.7. Another is, and this is by no means suggesting we go with the 60 by 135, that's part of what the PUD negotiations are for, is for us to negotiate with the developer what it is that you guys as the Plan Commission and we as the town want, is to send you guys some startling reports that I see from the EPA, from AARP, the housing unit development, the U.S. housing development, is that there is a lot of change in the demographic of who is looking for housing. You have a lot of a greater shift in single individual households, couples that aren't having children, they're having their fur babies. For lack of a better term, you have a greater olding population that they're looking for something where that's low maintenance, lower size. And that's just something that I want the Plan Commission in general to be aware of as the shift of demographic and changes in our population and what it is that we as a community may need to look at providing for our citizens and our town to help people age in place and enjoy our community from childhood to well into their retirement age.
Yeah, actually, I agree with that, I understand that. Well, my opposition is not even to the 60-foot lot. It's not. I could be okay with that. I know you guys have a good product. I like the planning. That's not the issue. My issue is I don't know how our town at this point where we're at today could support this. And I can't even see 10 years from now because so much could change between now and 10 years where we're going to be led with that. Or even 10 years from now, we can support that, because right now I'm concerned with, 2023, 2024. So for me to approve this at this point would be a tough pill to swallow, because I just don't see how the town can handle it. I just don't.
Well, the way we're gonna handle it is additional infrastructure like we're doing on the west side with the west side sewer that's up there. And now the new water tower, on the north end of town, as well as additional water line, et cetera. So the ball has been rolling for the last decade of improvement of infrastructure, Heather. And I understand what you're saying with roads and things. No matter where we go around unincorporated Lake County, where towns expand, the road is made nicer where they are, and I think David's spot on. So maybe David, you know, as the next decade goes, the community should be thinking about residential TIF that has now been passed with state legislatures in order to fix the situation with some of the existing roads, because we do have a lake in the middle of town, which screws up traffic always, right? So how do we take the 153rds and the 155ths or what have you, and make them better, more major thoroughfares? It's hard to do if we don't own them naturally. A lot of those east-west roads are not necessarily in our community, same with 117th, but a study should, yeah, for sure be done, because, you know, how do you do it? You know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It does take financial means to accomplish any goals, but that's how you know, that's what the town's been doing, though, Heather, for the last decade or more.
Yeah, I've been here, John, I know, I get it.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, and to piggyback on Ashley's point earlier, I could have brought a bunch of data, and I'll forward some of it. Zillow actually put out a article today talking about the changing demographic going forward. I also had some information from NERC that did their 2050 plan, and they studied all the communities, and they talked about the shortage of housing in Cedar Lake. So we pay attention to all those things, the demographics. Like I said, we've worked with our builders to figure out what the product is that they think the need for is here, and what they can build and what they can sell. And so that's how we arrived at this density. You know,
If you did 70-foot lots instead of 60s, how many lots you lose in that little section?
I don't know, I'd have to go back. I mean,
Well, you did, but Jack, you did that, right, on the other side? On the other side, you have,
Well, that was if it was in a grid. It wouldn't-
oh, yeah. That
You
was,
just lose
those
lots.
were, this was 80 by 125. So this would be a straight R2 zoning, 80 by 125s. All 80, all 125. No green space, no walking trails. You got your detention ponds, you've got a park. But, you got 530 lots, all at 80 foot. So we're asking for maybe a slight increase from asking for a straight R2 zoning to do this, to go to a PUD and ask for something that's a lot more creative and appealing.
well, for sure, between the two of those, that's obviously
Yeah.
better. For
Heather,
an extra 20 lots.
if you look at that northern block, kind of on the old plan that's in your iPad,
Yeah,
to me, it looks like it's the same block layout, and that's where it's gone from cottage homes to
Yep.
the 70-footers.
Yep.
It goes from about 30 cottage homes to 27, so you lose 3.
Per
Just to give you
block.
an idea.
Per
Per block,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So if you can do like a percentage on that, it'll give you an idea.
The homes you've built in Lakeside, or your company built in Lakeside, are nice looking houses.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
I will agree that there is no skimping getting done, and they're desirable, and I'm sure you see that in your marketing research as
It's
well.
one of the most popular subdivisions we have, and to this day, we probably get 1 to 2 inquiries a week from potential customers saying, when are you gonna have more lots in Lakeside?
I guess one of the things that frustrates me, and I've said this over the past year or so, why can't Cedar Lake ever get a Copper Creek? Why does it always have to be something substandard to what gets built in Crown Point, or even in Lowell in some instances, though, with
I don't think it is. I wouldn't say this is substandard to Copper Creek at all. I'd say it's equal to or better
But the
than.
lot sizes are better in
They're
Copper
80s.
Creek.
They're
Yeah.
all 80s.
They're 80s.
125s in Copper.
And I don't think, from folks that I've talked to, I don't think anybody's complaining about an 80 or 85-foot lot.
Yeah.
It's, when you get down.
It's a rolling wooded piece of land. We had some character there to play with. We've got a flat, wide open cornfield here that we're trying to turn into something better. We're gonna add the roll to it. We're gonna add the trees to it, so, I just think 530 units of all 80-foot lots, 530 all 80-foot lots, plus the 200 we already have. That's pretty boring. I mean, that's, I don't know.
Heather, it's about, on average, 10% loss-ish,
Makes sense.
depending on your block, depending on your car lots you have, stuff like that comes into play, but around that.
Jack, please don't come back with 80-foot lots with that, don't come back with that, please. That'll be even harder pill to swallow.
It is, I get it.
I just want you to get rid of like 400 homes. That's nice.
Well, I mean, and again, the alternative is we could start to come in with a quarter of this every 2 years. And here's 125 lots, how does that sound, how does that look, looks good, fits into the puzzle. But we're trying to show you the big picture, and I know 550 is a big, scary number. We deal with this every time we do a master plan community, but that's why we plan it that way. Otherwise, it's just hodgepodge, and you just keep adding on and adding on, and
So if this is your proposal, what's the plan though? If I understand you would want to start next year, and then in phases,
yep.
how many phases? What does that look like?
We could start to put that together. It would probably be, well, 6 to 8 years, so probably 8 phases at least, maybe 10 phases. So I could actually start to put together a, kind of a, not a takedown schedule, but a development schedule that would help you see what the numbers would look like over time. And even as we develop, there's a lag from the development to the building to the occupancy. So there's that lag of years, potentially.
I'd be interested in seeing that, and then also the traffic study. Those two things would make sense to me.
Mr. President, can I ask a couple engineering points here? So they will be required to do a traffic impact study. It's going to be a broader study than I think a typical subdivision would be, because it hits 2 arterials effectively, 133rd, 141st. That's going to drive essentially what we're going to require as far as traffic improvements, roadway improvements, you know, particularly at 141st, but potentially offsite as well, depending what the numbers show.
Does Burke look at those patterns from time to time and?
We do. There's a need to do a thoroughfare kind of study for the entire town. That's kind of in the works with a local road safety audit we're doing currently, and then some other items that are coming towards the end of the summer. So it's kind of on a parallel track. The reason I think everybody's bringing up the TIS now is Jack, I think we need to discuss before you go down that path of the TIS to actually, so we're all on board about the scope of it. I don't want you guys to go down a path and then we need something extra or different. So we need to talk before we even get to that point. So that's TIS, connection points. I think initially at your first concept plan, you had one at your northeast corner, not Lakeside Original.
Yes.
Essentially near lot 32, or 65, sorry. It kind of heads to that larger eastern ag parcel. I think there should be another connection there. It's a pretty large parcel to the east, and it's a different owner than the one to the south.
Yep. Well, we've got one from Lakeside Original there too.
Well,
Yep.
the problem is that all 3 of those owners are different.
Yeah.
And
this one.
if they develop separately, there should be some type of connectivity.
Sure.
And then coming back to Finch Court, we talked about this, I think, last time we shared, coming out of Robin's Nest. Do you want that to tie in or not? There's a road stud on Robin's Nest that's coming from the north right there. I believe
Well,
last...
at that standpoint, you say, yeah, if I lived in Robin's Nest, I'd say, hell no, you know?
Yeah, I mean, planning-wise, it's there, it probably should be connected. If it's not going to be connected, then it probably shouldn't exist. It just doesn't, it makes it look like it's screwed up in a way.
The only benefit I saw to that, and we would do whatever, we'll connect it.
Yeah.
I would think they wouldn't want us to, but the only other thought I had was that could potentially be another connection point for Robin's Nest to get to the Founder's Creek Trail out of their subdivision. So, you know, we could leave a little corridor between the 2 subdivisions here where there could be a trail connection. That could be a benefit.
I mean, regarding Finder's Trail, I mean, yes, we have funding for it. There's still some debate which side of the creek we're going to be on. So if we're on the west side, which is probably the desirable,
We'll get there.
we need to get across that creek with that path somehow.
Yeah.
And I think the town would look to you for making that connection for that in particular. And then you had mentioned engineering plan. You wanted a PUD approval without engineering?
Yeah, and I think you guys have done that before, but obviously the PUD concept, to get to that PUD zoning, we certainly would not want to spend 6 months and $500,000 engineering this thing to have it not get the PUD.
I think there has to be some level of comfort, though. I think the lease we've done is some type of not even concept, but at least, 50%, something like that, so we know, especially with the large infrastructure improvements of water and sanitary, to make sure it actually works with the land plan.
Yep.
If we're off and we all of a
We've
sudden
done that.
shoot through a property or something, it's not gonna be good.
We've done that. We know it works, but we can get that information to you to show that it does.
Okay.
And to go back on roads, I don't know, are you done? Or do you have something else?
Density calcs is another one, and this is my opinion. Density calcs are pretty, you can spin them any way you want. My interpretation of a density calc, especially when it comes to open space, is usable open space. Right now, they have parks, or detention and open space, including in that to derive their units per acre. I mean, we added 20 acres along Founder's Creek, but that's not usable unless we're actually gonna turn it into something that's usable. It's heavily wooded, it's heavily graded. I mean, we drop off hard through there.
Yep.
So I almost feel like it's kind of cheating the system to bring your density down when 10 acres of that open space is a giant lake. It's not recreational. Parks, yes. General open space, yes. But my only kind of advice would be take that with a grain of salt.
So removing the lakes and the heavily wooded lots, buildable land is what we need our density count to be.
Well, and we're gonna have to eventually go through our park dedication calculation. Right now, just looking at the numbers of park space, like true park space here that's usable is 4.7, a small existing pond to the east, and then a smaller one kind of in the paired cottages.
So
I'm willing to bet that that's not gonna even be close to what's required.
The land for the trail and the cost of the trail, we would consider that park. That's our linear park recreation space.
Yeah, and that's, if we're going to the PUD, that's part of that negotiation, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would say with how large the development is, and just looking at it eyeballing without doing that calc, it looks short to me. Quite a bit short.
And I would disagree with you on the density calculation.
I-
It's always been the number of lots per overall acre, whatever that is.
That's your word, it says.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm telling you to look at it from a different perspective. We've talked about this in the past, say if we have floodplain areas that's not developable. That's not park space. You're not gonna be able to play in it, you're not gonna be able to enjoy it. It's not recreational. It's simple green space that you can't touch. So, call that my opinion, but, that's how I look at it.
And I wanted to go back to the traffic, talking about traffic and traffic counts and traffic study. We've started to look at that already. A typical two-lane road maxes out at about 15,000 cars, roughly. The county gives us traffic counts on a lot of these roads. 141st right now is running at about 500 cars. I think, what is that a day? 500 vehicles per day on 141st. So for that road to max out, it has to reach 15,000. We're nowhere near that, and even with this whole development, it's nowhere near that. So the roads can handle it. It's the intersections that we have to look at, and that's what we will begin to look at, and where it is on the traffic.
And that's assuming your tie-in corridors are good roads, aren't hobbled out, you're gonna be adding not only traffic, but pressure on those roads that aren't in great shape, and that deteriorates them. And just to look at your frontage from that simple perspective doesn't cut it.
Your detention areas, are they gonna have aeration or anything like that?
Yeah, and I believe that's town ordinance. When we get to sizable ponds like this that actually hold water, we end up putting fountains in them.
Yeah, they're size based on surface area, so most likely the big guy's gonna
These two
need
for
several.
sure. That one, I don't know if that might end up being a dry pond, but the two wet ponds would for sure have fountains in.
Any more comments, discussion?
One more thing for me, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, John.
So right now, a park with swing set or what have you is on the, south side where you come in.
Yes.
And then was there another small swing set area type park over by the Thunder Creek Trail or not?
I should have mentioned that earlier. There's actually a park in the original Lakeside, that right now sits as a vacant field. And that is slated to get a piece of playground equipment when we begin phase 2, or unit 2, which is now. So as we move forward, there will be a playground on the north end of Lakeside and a playground on the south side of Lakeside. But for us, the park component is the linear park and the trail. We think that's the best feature of the whole project, but there's a lot of cost involved in that, not just the little bit of land that it sits on, but to put in an asphalt paved trail with a stone base and then maintain it, and have various features along the way and tie-ins to different parts of the neighborhood. We actually added some parking spaces at this park. We added some parking spaces at the trailhead where it heads towards Founder Creek. We added some parking spaces in the island down here in the south, so I forgot to mention that, but there's, again, a lot of thought put into all of this that makes this very functional.
Yeah, and I think what makes that Lakeside so hot too is you're so close to Lemon Lake, so people probably take advantage of that, awesome county park as well, is my guess, why it's been a success for you.
Yep. Okay, we've got a lot of work to do. We'll continue to hash this out, and we'll be back at some point.
It's a good start.
Thank you.
Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Number 5, ordinance 1458, 133rd Commercial Corridor Overlay District. Comments?
So after the last work session, I went ahead and looked at, pretty much I picked 10 random lots in each zoning district along the 133rd Commercial Corridor Avenue, 10 from B1, 10 from B2, 10 from B3, just to kind of see what the total AD is for each of those areas in zoning districts, and what is the total AD of just the land that it sits on. So if it wasn't approved, what would the AD be? That gave me an average of total AD for a B1 is $437,200. For B2, it's $703,940, and for B3, it's $347,960, and that's with the improvements, that's total AD. For just the land that it's sitting on, it's $129,544.44 for B1, $223,090 for B2, and only $80,570 for B3. So when I compared all those ABs for each of the zoning districts, I put together 2 graphs that's in your packet. For both of them, B2 is the highest ranking AD for that entire corridor. So what that's showing me by trends is that when it's zone B2, that's the highest value property in that area. So when there was talks at a few of the meetings during public comment sessions that by putting on the B2 overlay, we would be reducing, prohibiting, taking away the property value. The math from the assessor's report card showed that it actually would help it and improve it. So that's the work that I did over the past month.
I think what confuses some of the 133rd corridor, I guess I don't understand what the intent was when the zoning ordinance was adopted. What was the intent at the time for the people that were working on that? And the council at that time, what was the intent for the zoning ordinance?
There was no discussion or specific focus on 133rd. The B2 zoning district classification was looked at just like B1 or residential. It was looked at in isolation. That isolation resulted in us having a project issue and having the circumstance become live, if you will. We didn't think about it separately, at least my notes don't reflect it. We didn't talk about it separately, and how do we make this valuation lead? How do we have this discussion about specifics?
I'm still hung up on one item that has become related to this as of tonight, is zoning ordinance was studied, worked on, analyzed, adopted, and I just don't understand how someone thought it was a good idea after doing all that. But I don't know what the intent was. I'm trying to understand the intent, and then you get to a point where the very first thing that comes in after that, you have to have a variance from that, and that becomes a good idea. I just don't understand. I want to understand the intent of what, maybe somebody could help me.
Well, it's simple. The intent was for the parts of town that are gonna grow, like the 41 corridor and that new industrial park. And now what happened with, what is it called, Railside, the old Kretz farm. So I think when we wrapped up those ordinances and focused on this one in particular, B1, B2, B3, we were really more thinking growth versus what we have platted all over the map around our lake, right? We have crazy zoning all around our community.
That I agree with, and I don't disagree with the 40,000 square foot guideline for a B3 use. And I just don't understand how this automotive thing seemed logical to anybody after doing all the work on a zoning ordinance to create a better environment to plan the 133rd corridor, and everywhere for that matter. I'm befuddled by that, because if the intent is to have quality plan going forward in every zoning district, I don't know why something like that NYBY would have ever been considered after putting all the thought and process and wherewithal into the zoning ordinance.
I cannot speak to my predecessor or what her thoughts, opinions, discussions have been with them going back, because I know when I started with the town as the reporting secretary, we were still in the midst of the zoning ordinance change. I remember sitting in at least 3-4 special work sessions where we went through and discussed the zoning ordinance. So I cannot speak to what her thoughts, intentions, planning perspective had been regarding that petition. What I can say is what I have done in the research with the comprehensive plan that I talked about during my last presentation is our comprehensive plan has called for the 133rd corridor since 2012 to be a pedestrian-friendly corridor. And the definition of a B3 is not pedestrian-friendly, it's motorist-friendly. So I cannot speak to why they were not better advised on a better...
That wasn't the intent, though, certainly, when the zoning ordinance was adopted. Am I right, John? You still there, John?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know. I just know that, the premise was primarily the more larger picture, not so much 133rd. I mean, if you ask me, now that we've got the culverts, now that this guy apparently was in under the radar, what is this corridor overlay district even apply to anymore? You know, there's somebody possibly gonna buy JoJo's Corner and make, or Mr. and Mrs. G's or whatever, and so, there's a few, you know, you got Jeff Schmal, you got the one Jenkins House, and you've got Stinger that are all sitting on B3 zone. I personally don't like taking people's zoning away. I think it's wrong. I don't know what, are we beating a dead horse now with this commercial corridor overlay district? Now that we've kind of already started building it, you know, is it a viewpoint now? Because there's not much more left on that strip of land between 41 and Parish.
John's making a really, really good point. At this point, there are very few parcels that would be subject to an overlay once created, if created. What kicked it off as an initiative, though, was the flurry of activity we had following the Summer Winds commercial PUD that came into town. It got approved and was built. But right behind it, you've got culverts, you've got Center Bank, et cetera.
Which all is logical for the corridor, that's all logical.
It is. What wasn't logical in comparison to that was the Nyby project. That was not comparable to, because of a different type of use. And that is what really triggered a discussion, a review, commencement of analysis. And going backwards, looking at how we got there.
And Dave, I'm not trying to go backwards, and I think I understand now what the intent was, and it wasn't just for the 133rd corridor, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, I'm just not. But one variance away from the zoning ordinance, whatever parcels are left in the 133rd corridor, now make them become targets for, I mean, the precedent will be set, and whatever somebody, and if they put together the 40,000 square feet for B3 use, that's what the zoning ordinance says, I think I'd be good with that. There's a potential for NYBY to put together the 40,000 square feet that they need for the B3 use. Have they done any research on getting that done? Because the next person that comes in, you're gonna have a hard time holding them to that standard when this one flies.
No, you'll have to identify and.
Acquire another piece of property.
Just buy more land,
Yeah.
I was under the impression when they bought that, it was zone B3 when they bought the property, and then they changed it after they bought it.
The zoning ordinance changed the requirements, the zoning didn't change, but when Todd Jenkins was here, that was discussed. And he said, well, if somebody wanted to buy Jeff Schmal's property and his property and put them together, they made 40,000 square feet, it could be a B3 use. The answer to that is yes, but they met the guidelines of the zoning ordinance. So, but in this case, it makes that moot, because I forget how many square feet the NYBY is.
2,300.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even close.
But was it zone B3 when they bought it?
Yeah.
Some of it was, not all of it.
No, it
think
was all B3.
And if I bought a piece of property at B3 and I plan on something, then 2 months down the road, they change it to a B2 and I can't build, I'd be upset.
Well, I understand it.
Okay, we're all talking circles here, that's not the conversation, not changing the zoning, what changed was the square footage requirement in the middle of everything that they had going on. That's what the confusion is.
Yes.
All these other things just happened to lead into it with the commercial overlay, and the timing of it stunk.
They got their application in after the zoning ordinance was passed.
But they started it before. I mean, the timing stunk on the whole thing, like Dave said. I mean, it smells. The whole thing is like, none of it was good the way it all rolled out, timing-wise. So, but the thing now is that the variances were approved by the BZA. And the only thing that's coming up in front of them is whether or not they renew that extension.
Were those zoning variances contingent on them getting plat approval?
They're contingent on everything. It was
Okay.
your cost contingent.
So they go away if this commission says no.
Or if the BZA says that they're not gonna extend it.
Just asking.
Yeah.
Mr. President, if I may,
Yes.
I apologize for getting out of hand
No,
too.
You're fine.
The overlay
That was
district
our-
doesn't change the underlying zoning, the underlying zoning remains. We're not changing people's zoning. What we're doing is, if this goes through and this moves forward, we're then protecting a corridor where the town has invested a lot of time, a lot of money to make it a desirable corridor for a summer wind, for a culvert, for another bank to go in.
That's what I
And it
was
adds-
hoping the intent was.
It adds an additional protection to that corridor, so then you just can't have another automotive repair shop, another heavy intense B3 use just come in if they meet all the requirements. Then they would need to go in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals and then the Town Council to get approval through a variance of use. Additionally, while there's not that many blank parcels, so to speak, if properties sell and get redeveloped, it would then have any potential future redevelopment in that corridor to then meet our the B2 overlay requirements, again, providing an additional protection to that corridor to allow for what the more desirable business or intent is, which is that pedestrian-friendly use on a neighborhood community business corridor.
I feel like we just talked about in a huge circle though, because what I heard was that there's not that many B3s left. So why, pardon me being flat out frank, why are we bothering them with the overlay?
This
We
is
shouldn't anymore.
an overlay map with everything. So we actually do, all this is B3, all that's B3, there's some B3 there, we have some B3 here. So there is still a good chunk of B3 in that corridor that has the potential to redevelop in the future.
Okay, but, okay. Yeah.
And now there is, I mean, once the precedent is set, you're limited to the control you're gonna have over it because you varied, the very first thing was a variance.
Well, what I'm hearing though is the overlay isn't necessarily, important at this point.
That's my impression,
And-
that's my opinion.
And onto that, your concern is the variance, the zoning that changed, right? And the variance that was granted to these people.
Yes. Right, in the midst of the zoning ordinance changing. I'm just and I'm not trying to pick on Nathan, but Nathan's picked up on what he's doing here, and then if he represents the next person that comes in and does it, he's gonna use the same argument, and any other attorney's gonna use the same argument. That's what attorneys do. They look for arguments to prove,
You
to
also
prosecute
have
their
record.
case.
You also have record, though, you can rely on, and with the focus being on protection of the zoning district, the corridor, and protection of the $6, $8, $10 million taxpayer investment in that corridor, and that's really what it is. We talked about that as we worked on developing the criteria and the purpose and the business reasons for doing an overlay. It's about taxpayer dollars and the benefit to the entire community, not to a single business owner. That was talked about and emphasized.
We now have the industrial park on 41.
I know,
And we now have Lakeside.
that even makes it more frustrating for
Yep.
me, because that's where that stuff should go.
Yep,
Well, but
exactly where it should go.
that's now, that wasn't when all
No,
of this
it wasn't, you're right. You're right.
started initially.
You're right.
It's a hindsight is 2020, but I mean, the reality is that it can be changed because they're gonna go in front of the BCA and ask for an extension, and that can be stopped, that can be not granted.
Denied, yep.
This is a unique situation here because things started prior
Yep.
to the adoption of an ordinance. In the midst of the adoption of the ordinance, this petitioner was requesting variances, which some were granted, and then he fell into this glitch about being, like 22,000 square feet instead of 40.
Yep.
And so that's where we sit. Now, do I think that this sets a precedent? No, because the other people, whoever may come in and want the same thing, did not start their procedure or their petition prior to ordinance change.
Doesn't matter, it's not a hardship, John. That doesn't meet the definition of a hardship because they started it before the ordinance changed.
Unfortunate.
It's just unfortunate, but it's not a hardship. That's where the problem comes in for this. The government can change, any government entity can change its guidelines anytime it wants to, and the next day you have to be applicable to those. So, because government works that way, you can't argue that that's a hardship. It's unfortunate, but, I mean, that's just the way it is. It's not a hardship. They haven't proved it's a hardship. They didn't prove it was a no offense, but they didn't prove it was a hardship from the very beginning because of that.
Okay, now, we're discussing this ordinance tonight to decide if we're gonna send it a favorable or unfavorable.
No.
No.
We're to work study, you're talking.
Or just a work study and we're talking.
I'm just
Okay.
venting more than anything
See,
else,
because
you know.
the 133rd Street corridor, all the time we talk about it, the one word that came out consistently is, we wanna clean it up.
And that makes sense, to me.
Yeah, but nobody ever said what cleaning it up is. Do you wanna give it a bath, or do you wanna get rid of the mechanicals, or?
That's where the 40,000 square foot requirement came in. It had to meet that criteria
I
to,
understand all that, Greg, but nobody explained what cleaning up is. If you don't have a definition explained to you, or given to you, how can you go ahead and do it, and then you wind up with a mess like this?
So how about a homework assignment? 10 minutes between now and the next work study session, and read the B2 and B3 zoning districts in our zoning market. And we carry this on and assess whether maybe beefing up or deleting or excising uses will be the first step.
You mean the differences between the B2 and the B3?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to do my homework, I've already done it. I would get an A+, you can text me if you'd like.
If the repair shop on the corner there now don't have the 40,000 square feet, it reverts back, he sells it, they gotta go in as a B2 then, right?
if it's empty for 6 months. If it's not an operating business for 6 months, it would revert back to whatever the current zoning standard is.
Well, in this case, it is a B, if we're talking about the one on Parish 133rd, it is zoned B3. If it were to go, not be in existence for 6 months, then it loses its legal non-conforming status, and it would either need to go in front of this board and the BZA, or the BZA, depending on what they intend on doing, if they're fixing it. If they're changing the building, changing the site plan, that would need planning commission. If they're wanting a B3 use, they're going to need to go for variances because it doesn't meet the requirements.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the overlay district would affect two cases. One for B3 current parcels or combined parcels in the future that exceed 40,000 square feet, or legal non-conforming that sits vacant for 6 months. It would affect those two cases specifically and those only, pretty much.
Oh, Tom and Ed probably falls in there too, doesn't it?
The way we have the corridor laid out, it would, because it's the 350 feet north and south.
And Paul Perez is it Paul Perez, his place too, probably.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah, and
There's a few.
like the guy that was worried about his apartments, of the mixed use, it's on the bottom right, or whatever that
Which
boost.
it's legal non-conforming.
It won't make a difference to him.
Unless it sits vacant for 6 months, then it reverts.
For me, when we really got into it, I don't see the point of the overlay at this point, just to be frank.
I agree.
Maybe there isn't.
For me, if we're gonna do anything, we need to tighten up our requirements on what something should look like on the exterior, so if there is gonna be an auto place, it would look like this and not like others in town. But the overlay, I think we're asking for more problems than good at this point.
If somebody, and this could certainly happen, and just like the Jenkins small properties, I'm gonna use them for example only, but if somebody wanted to buy one of those because they're zone B3, and if it's 20,000 square feet, they wanna build a building that's 20,000 or 27, whatever this one is, because they got 27,000 square feet or more, I'd say they can come in here and they have an argument to do another this.
I agree with you.
So,
I think we set a standard. I do. I agree. And any lawyer that says that this doesn't is fight for their
He
client,
knows.
and I get it, but it's.
Nathan knows he's setting a precedent, he knows what he's doing, I mean, he's working for his client, and that's what he does.
That's what he's doing, yeah.
Heather, one of the things you mentioned is maybe looking at doing architectural standards. If Dave's good with it, maybe we shelf this discussion for a couple months, and we get to the drawing board back on our side, and we look at potentially updating this to create an overlay district with architectural standards. That way, any redevelopment or future development would have to then comply with what it would be desirable for an architectural look.
I mean, I feel like, Mr. Hushin, you know this, a lot of towns and cities do that, requirements on, Crump Point did it with Broadway, with
Broadway, yeah.
all those crappy buildings that, you know, those nonsense businesses
Williams
look
Square.
amazing, because they kept the same, the brick and the same signage, and the signage low, and no flat, I mean,
All those were built into overlay districts though.
I wanna talk about the overlay,
That was a constructive overlay, the Williamsburg concept.
I believe that would be more, constructive for our purposes at this point with what we're dealing with than the overlay. I think we're asking for problems with it.
That little lot by, between Dairy Queen and Sportsman's Inn, that's not big enough to be a B1, B2, or B3, is it?
I don't think so, I don't know how deep it is.
I think it's 90 by, I don't know, but yeah. So that's gonna remain vacant.
100 by.
It's not big enough for a cottage home.
Depends on what you're looking at.
80 by 250.
Can we leave this on the agenda for purposes of staff and us talking and perhaps bringing some form-based data and information?
I could move it to update items for now.
Then maybe
Yeah, that's-
kind of a thought process about the corridor, protecting it. Maybe it isn't even this corridor. I think in our lifetimes, I think you all would agree with me, we're gonna see development on the northeast corner of 41 and 133rd. We're gonna see some dilapidated old homes coming down within our lifetime, and changing of use. So there'd be some reasons for at least studying it a little bit and perhaps advanced preparing. Maybe not with this tool, this is just a planning tool. It's a method of enhancement of value and quality of life and how people use and keep their land. But we could put ourselves in a preparatory position and maybe begin amending the ordinance accordingly.
I can see the benefit elsewhere, for sure. Here, I don't, and on 133rd, I just don't see the benefit. I see more negatives than benefits.
Well, it may be the tool du jour, if you will. I know a lot of communities around us are using it, enhancing it, amending it, modifying it. I did a public hearing in Sherrill Monday night. They're having a public hearing on changing, amending their Route 41 overlay district, of all things. I thought that was interesting and appropriate. They fine-tune stuff because of experiences. It helps concrete and make certain what our policies are. They're floating a little bit. It gives the developer, property owner, a guide, a more certain guide, or a better, an updated guide, or an improved guide. And it helps us improve ourselves.
Okay, well, why don't we leave this on the agenda, like you said, an update item, and then we'll ask about it the next time.
We'll keep, we'll get together and we'll start working on that form-based and architectural standards that you're looking for and see what we can come up with.
Now, let's figure out what we want to do here.
Josh, I think it might be interesting to take I know you have that map. If we could shrink it down and get it on our thing.
You should have it, but I'll send out an individual map to all of you guys tomorrow morning.
Well, no, like next time we meet, so we can see it and which B3 properties
Yep,
There
I'll
are.
make sure it's on the next work session on the iPad for you guys.
Just for next time we talk about it, that would be helpful. Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, update items, building regs and fee, amendments, reviewing.
Could I back this up and segue into a topic related to tonight's meeting?
I didn't catch that.
Would you allow me, please, to bring up another topic?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's important related to what happened here tonight. That's Lakeside South. We're really at the 2.0 level of next generation PUD. And I want to remind us all of a lot of things that have happened regarding this property and tangential development improvements, infrastructure improvements, and the like. This particular property, and I'm not certain, Greg, if you were on the council at that point, I know Jim knows and knew the property. The Lakeside development was a 200-acre farm. It had a big detention basin in the middle of it, like most farm fields do around here, and was the target of potential Cedar Lake east side growth. There was no growth in the east side of Cedar Lake. And Jim Weezer brought a client in to bought that farm and processed an annexation. The reason was to build homes and expand the community, and it was at a time it was Death Valley. We didn't know what we didn't know until that annexation occurred, and what we learned after the annexation occurred was there was a problem with, or lack of full capacity water supply and volume for firefighting purposes, suppression. It began a awfully intense and important dialogue that was made by a developer with the town staff at the time, town council at the time. Ultimately, the town worked with the developer who became Schilling. It wasn't Schilling in the beginning. Schilling came into that project in that circumstance to squeeze the appropriate amount of water for purposes of development and consider approval of a small, and when I say small, I mean 54 lots, small development out there given the amount of infrastructure. Schilling cooperated, the town worked at it with Schilling in kind of a developmental, unofficial, official context, and we spent a lot of time and a lot of money. Funds were raised, we bought the east side utility, and funds were raised through rates. Schilling went out and spent some money in digging holes, we spent some money in digging holes. There were lots of things that were done in furtherance of goodwill, intended expansion and extension of the community on the east side of town, and related. You heard tonight, and I was glad to hear it. I hadn't heard the details and how far along they were. The Schilling development is going to extend sewer and water lines a mile each. That's a pretty good investment on their part. It's really good for us as a town. There have been a tremendous amount of quid pro quo types of things discussed. I wouldn't want to get into Don's head because that would scare me, but he knows about a lot of that discussion. It's been all at technical levels, really. Neil Simstad, Don Oliphant, et cetera, with the developer. The proposed development has been anticipated for quite some time as a consequence of these things. Water was found, et cetera. And you can see some things are starting to tie themselves in. When you see it, this is a pretty good concept drawing that was provided us. When you see Founder's Creek on the left side of the page here, and you see the trail proposed, that's a real project. That wasn't even thought about when we started this, but it evolved to this point. We own almost all the land we need to build that project. We have the grant monies that I think Don and his team have worked on with Chris administrative staff, there's gonna be a trail there. And it's gonna connect to some things, and people are gonna be able to use it. They're gonna be able to get into Lemon Lake County Park without endangering their lives doing so. It's gonna be a combination with this development project that's before you. The safety factors have been reviewed awfully carefully. There's a lot of cooperation about how that goes. I asked him tonight specifically for his outline of the development points, highlights, so we know and we can compare and we can make certain. But Schilling has, through the course of this property coming from 10 years ago or thereabouts to the present, has stepped up to review these matters with us. There has been agreement on a lot of things, actually. I heard from you tonight. That's good. You'll get a good project out of it with a good negotiation. But I made a note about quid pro quo. Some of these considerations are valid considerations in comparison to invalid ones. You're asking good questions, you're asking hard questions. Just wanted to lay a little foundation for the negotiation, if you will, the dialogue that will be had coming forward. Pretty important project given how much money, how much time, how much importance it has to public safety and quality of life coming up. And he's right, he also, in response to the question about school, at Crown Point Schools have built addition to MacArthur just because of this project. This was the project that tripped them to do it. So, a lot of people have been watching and wait and early and silent preparation. That's what's going on at this point. I thank you for that. I just wanted to make certain we made good foundation and you did the right thing. And I know you will.
Okay. Building regulations and fee, being reviewed.
They are. They're currently in staff review right now. Last I talked with Chris, we were looking at maybe July of moving forward with that. We'll keep you updated as it goes.
Okay. Number 2, Cedar Lake Storage, public performance letter of credit expires July 1st, 2023.
They are looking at extending it. The banker who handles that letter of credit has reached out. They're working on getting the extension to me. I'm hoping to have it by next Friday.
Okay. Number 3, Beacon Point East, Unit 2, performance letter of credit expires July 28th, 2023.
They have our punch list along with Unit 1 punch list, so it's in their court right now.
Think they'll be done by then?
I'm gonna say no.
No?
We'll see.
Okay. Number 4, Beacon Point Unit 1A, maintenance letter of credit expires August 5th, 2023.
Take 4 and 5 together. We've completed our field reviews. The punch list letter should go out tomorrow. Public Works has completed their storm and water reviews. Those will go out with it, and then we're just waiting on sewer review. So they'll have all the information they need to correct everything before they expire in August.
Okay.
That one should be okay.
Number 6, Rose Garden Estates, Unit 3, performance letter of credit expires August 22nd, 2023.
Based on comments at last meeting after these update items, we contacted them directly to basically ask the hard question of what's going on with all the outstanding punch list items, as-built items. We did that on the 26th. I believe David and Chris and Ashley were copied on that. I actually got a phone call back from Tom McSherry this afternoon, kind of right before the meeting, said they're working on it.
What does that mean? That's like the response you get to people that
aren't working on it. He was under the impression that we had already
Right.
received Unit 2 as-built, which we have not. Our last punch list letter went out on the 20th of April, which had the 85 just field notes for Units 2 and 3. That doesn't include any of the as-built for Units 2 or 3 because we haven't received them yet. That also doesn't include any of Public Works underground inspections. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff for them to address before, you know, they're leaving town.
Mr. Austin, at what point do you step in, or could we have you step in, or can you step in with any of this? We've spent so much time, you've spent so much time, the town has spent so much time chasing these people, and this isn't necessarily stuff like, you know, this road's caving in. However, we all certainly would like to get it off of our plate.
I can get involved anytime you want.
I mean, I'm not the decision maker here, but
I'm thinking right now they only have maybe 10 to 15 lots left. It's maybe even that many.
I think it's 10 or less at this point in time.
do they have
I know
permits
Katie-
pulled for those?
They have pulled permits for every single lot in there, and they are, in completion stages of all of them. I think they sold all their model homes, so all their model homes have been converted to standard homes at this point in time. They've got like 8 to 10 left, I believe, is what I was told earlier this week, is what Katie, their construction manager for the site, has said. So they're nearing completion for the residential stuff.
I think the phone call that I got this afternoon is them maybe finally coming to the realization that they're almost done and they still have a lot of work to do on our end. They've been really focusing on getting all their houses up and not necessarily ignoring our information. Yeah, but I think they're realizing they're not going anywhere, and they know. Lennar's a big company, they know how this works. So it's, I can't tell you why they've delayed and ignored, but I hope they're moving to a point now where they'll actually start taking actions, but I can't guarantee that.
Is there enough surety? Do you have enough surety?
Oh, yeah. We got plenty to complete everything.
This is a nationally traded company, we know that. Strong demand is an adverse event, and those are the types of things they have to report and they have to disclose. Maybe that's the next step.
I mean, in the end, it's a good thing that they've kind of waited to do surface, because they'd be beating up that Unit 1 surface if they got it down 2 years ago. I mean, eventually they're gonna probably do surface all at once, which will be a better end product. But no, it's frustrating, the fact that we've had very little communication with them, and some of our as-built letters are over 2 years old now.
And they've changed,
Easy.
like the management over there has changed like 7 times.
Yeah, I think they're on their third construction manager, or at least field manager, that we deal with. Yeah.
Who is it now?
Her name's Katie. Prior to that, I know they've had a Nick, they've had a Daryl, they've had a Tom, they've had a Tim, I've lost track of how many
Those
names.
aren't even real people.
I've seen them.
No, okay.
Because they would have to come in and take red checks, so I know they've existed, but it's just been
A lot of turnover.
a lot of turnover.
Are they working? I mean, do you see them out there working every day?
Well, they're out there, but I mean, like I said, the houses that they're actually finishing, especially on the exterior, are almost none right now. The ones that are remaining are primarily interior. So, compared to what it was last year, when they were really getting into like end of Unit 2 and end of, beginning of Unit 3, no, it's not that busy, but that's just because they're running out of lots.
I think they've moved out to the construction managers at this point in time, and they're just down to the one.
Yeah. I mean, they've had the infrastructure in the ground for quite a while. Like, we haven't done any heavy infrastructure, like field inspections in a while for installation purposes.
Last
It's
time,
been
they
a
haven't even
while.
taken their Christmas wreaths down, so I don't really think they're on too much on top of it.
I was by
I'm done
the,
with these people,
I was
done.
by the Winfield project, Aylesworth today, and they're going like gangbusters.
Huge.
You step in the wrong place, you're gonna get run over.
Mhm.
So I don't know, that's why I asked if they're working over here, or they slowed down tremendously, or what.
Slowed down because mostly everything's in. So,
What can we do to get them off dead center?
I'll probably let her know this, has anybody here talked to Todd Clevin?
no, not recently.
He's the guy you can shake up to get some, upper management. I think he's their local.
I mean, we can start copying some of their VPs on our letters and see what it does to really shake it. I mean, the company's so big is the problem that they have several different, like, departments that handle this stuff, and they don't talk to each other, which is part of the reason why I think their building side has requested for a reduction in letter of credits over the years, but the next day, their financial side just brings in another check. So we're just like, okay, well, we're gonna stop until it expires again, we're not gonna waste our time. They don't talk to each other.
We are wasting time, and we're wasting lots of time with them.
Yeah.
We just wasted 5 minutes talking about them, again.
So.
Okay. Moving on. Public comment. Jerry?
My name is Jerry Wilkening. I live at 10826 West 131st Avenue. I have quite a few questions, some comments. We talked about Beacon Point. We talked about Beacon East. I'm going to refer to Beacon West as across the road. Schilling's definitely brings a quality product here in town. There's no doubt about that. There's been some trade-offs for Beacon Point, the park in particular. I agree with you, Don, the park plan is a little short. The Beacon Point barter was less than beneficial to the taxpayers, so I'm hoping that we get that dialed in. The other thing was, as Mr. Ross refers to it, is Nyby. The ordinance, when we went through that, was supposed to be, my intention was to sort out the existing non-conforming property with the regular property. From a planning point of view, the Nyby property doesn't have, I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember now, to the north of that property, doesn't it create some problems with easements and some other things back there?
No, the north of that's the apartment complex.
Yeah, but there's an easement behind there and some other things.
They increased the easement, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you go from a 7.5 to 10, because up there right now is our water and sewer, an old water line and old sewer line.
Well, when it comes to hardships, as Mr. Parker touched on, I want is not a hardship. Matter of fact, I want could be considered monetary, and I think that may be illegal. I could be wrong. So when it comes to Beacon and Lakeside and Park and all that stuff, I appreciate, you staying on top of that, Don. Speaking of Beacon Point, are the MS4 issues been resolved as far as they can be resolved right now?
I believe our last inspection recommended another fine for Beacon East and West.
Okay. All right. I think that was all. I think that was all I had. Vacant land, I don't understand the variance request. It's a vacant piece of property. I don't get it. I don't get it. When it comes to the 133rd corridor, a lot of those little pieces may have been discussed a little bit off and on. Some of you may remember. It was not one of the topics. Mr. Everly and the group went through some of the details, made some modifications, thus the 40,000 square feet. So, that's, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone online wants to say anything, please raise your hand, we'll let you speak.
No?
We have one attendee that not raise their hand.
Excuse me. You have to bear with me, I'm a little bit tired today, sorry about that. Terry Broaders, 14513 Morris. I just wanted to come up and get clarification on one thing and also shine a little light on something Heather brought to the table today. When we were when the discussion was taking place on the new Lakeside, talked about, was it 560 homes? And then it would go down to 530 when they did the straight R2 grid map. The one thing that wasn't mentioned on record about the straight R2 grid map with 530, each one of those units would have been a single-family unit. You would have had no townhomes on it, you would have had no villas, which would have been multiple rooftops on one unit. So the traffic that you talked about would have been less at the grid section at 530, because that's single-family, that's 2 cars basically. If you got 2 townhomes, you got 2 cars, you got 4 cars on one unit. So that would reduce the traffic and the volume of people when you talk about density. And then secondly, for Dave, you had talked about some of the stuff, you know, the quick pro quos. Now, and I'm not denying that you're right or wrong, but you had mentioned something that was contradictory to what the developer talked about. You had talked about the fact that he was going to run a mile's worth of sewage line, and which I do remember him saying that. But the water line to the property was already ran by Cedar Lake, I believe the developer said. So the property, the water is, the water is actually at the corner of the lot. That was already installed by, I'm guessing, the taxpayers. And then he did say he would be covering the water inside the development, which is obviously standard. So I just want to shed light on those 2 items. Thank you.
So real quick, they're not just running it through their development, they're gonna run it up and connect it to the existing water main on 133rd, which will then loop it to the
You do
new water
realize they
tower.
have to feed all the houses between that and that, so they're gonna have to run that water. Thank you.
I'm aware.
Thank you.
The sewer is in addition. They're running that all the way to the main.
Well, they would have to do that to build all the houses, right?
Okay, any other public comment? Chuck?
Chuck Tucker, 6100 West 136th Place. With the traffic off 141st, with all these houses he wanted put in there, you're gonna have a pinch point off 141st and Morris Street, and 133rd and Morris. With all the, there's no way, I don't see how all those vehicles are gonna be able to come through. And then you talk about future expansion, because you got the farm field just across the street. And you said, you know, before, possibly developing that. Or what happens if another developer comes in and wants to develop that before he gets the rest of his phases, when he was talking about different phases. So we gotta think about all that. I mean, it's just the density, like you said. And then when he was talking about the grid style, he didn't say nothing about the green space. That was no green space or
Correct,
anything,
for parks or detention.
which he needs to have that. So it wouldn't be just like that. It's just, as the town grows, we need to plan for the future. I mean, unless we have more roads coming out of the town, I don't see how we can sustain something like that.
Chuck, that TIS is gonna have limits similar to what you're talking about. We're gonna have them run it all the way down to Morse 133rd, Morse 141st, most likely all the way over to Cedar Lake Road all the way up to 133rd. Those 4 intersections will be kind of the bounding, I think, limits of the study. And then we'll have an existing baseline proposed with subdivision, and then also a growth factor, which will kind of give us an idea about where those pinch points, like you said, are going to be and how we can correct them.
Just getting out of my subdivision at this time coming here, it's a 5-minute wait, because you're waiting for traffic, you know.
Yeah.
And then it was a cluster, big mess trying to get in here with all these people, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
just imagine a lot more people coming in.
No, we understand. So, yeah, that's gonna be a big requirement. And that's kind of why they keep bringing it up, but there's variations of TISs. You can do very simple ones, very involved ones. And I think they need to know what we're gonna expect before they start going. So there's gonna be a lot of internal discussions with them about what we're gonna expect and what we wanna see.
You can do a traffic study at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can do a traffic study at 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, well, there's gonna be
5 o'clock,
counters,
you know.
there's gonna be a lot of counters out there. You're gonna see the little rubber line across the road in several different locations, I imagine. So, in that kind of, you know, that big square, I'm gonna call it that.
We're at a disadvantage with those farm fields, about growth. You know, this community was not meant develop like they want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're always in some respect to be catching our tail, just how this town was built, how it was laid out, how it is laid out with the lakes, stuff you just can't get past. We have two major thoroughfares across the lake, we're always gonna have that. Widening those thoroughfares is pretty stinking hard, based on how the town is laid out, based on how close some of the buildings are to that corridor, and we have a lot of stuff that we always have to consider that's unique to this town. So, and as we keep growing and growing and growing, it's something we're constantly looking at.
Thanks, Chuck. Any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one more question for Don.
Okay, John.
Don, what happened a few years back, Lemon Lake was talking about possibly moving their entrance to line up a little bit to the east of Lakeside and possible traffic signal. Is that still out there?
I don't know if I've ever heard of that.
I feel like that's something we talked about us wanting them to do. I don't think that
Yeah,
was ever.
I don't know if they've discussed that.
There was some communication had that contact be made with the Lake County Park Department to begin that initiative. I'm not certain that happened. We got a couple administrators since that discussion, but that was a talking point. By way of example, yesterday on my way to my office in the morning, I saw a couple of couples walking across 133rd into Lemon Lake County Park. There is use. Somebody said here tonight about a lot of use. It's true, there's a lot of use. People are using it, and they're not just walking. Sometimes they have strollers. I've seen all of them.
I see that all times of the day, people leaving Robin's Nest to go into
Yeah,
County Park.
they're going from Robin's Nest in their homes into the park.
John, that's something we can make part of the TAS to kind of evaluate that, especially with Lakeside Boulevard, which is the connection of Lakeside into 133rd being it's going to turn into a pretty large arterial to go north to south versus Cedar Lake Road or Morse. It's planned that way. It's a wider road right now than our typical road by about 5 feet. It doesn't allow parking, so we can look at that. The crossing into Lemon Lake Park will also be modified as part of the Trails project as well. There's supposed to be a trailhead parking area right there, right at their entrance, with bathroom facilities kind of included in that general thing, so there will be some intersection improvements if the intersection is still where it's at. Like Jack said, the funding's 28, so we got some time, but there's a lot of moving pieces, we'll say.
But it's on our radar screen.
For sure.
Okay, Jerry.
I just remembered one thing. When Mr. Foreman brought up Lemon Lake a little while ago, he's absolutely right. Everybody's seeing the traffic. But Lemon Lake Park is not a substitute for Lakeside Park. And putting equipment in for kids, phase 2, phase 3, phase 5, that doesn't seem right. It worked out fine for Monastery North, and I think it would work out good for any of these other places. The Kiwanis Park was traded, substituted for more real estate, and again, I don't think that benefited the taxpayers quite the way it should have. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Not up, Nick.
My name is Nick Rowley, I live in the 7,000 West 127th Place. There is a house that needs to be looked at by the roundabout there, and there's a house being built on that corner. And I don't know what part of that building is, but they're working on it, and I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but there is a house being built on, it's like a 3-apartment complex, or whatever it is. I know it's a house, but it's got like 3 or 4 garages involved in it.
It's permitted, Nick, and it's a single-family residence that's
Yeah.
on a platted subdivision.
Yeah.
It's already been reviewed by the town engineer, and it's been reviewed by the building department, and it's an approved permit.
Okay.
That's the one on the lake, right?
That's the one on North Cove.
Southwest corner of the roundabout.
Across from the...
Right here.
Right?
No.
Yeah, kind of right
The
behind,
Pepsi.
right by water fountain.
That's on the lake.
These, yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanna let you guys be aware of it.
Okay, thank you, Dick. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Brett. Do I need to take my name again? Chuck Becker, 6100 West 136 Place. Actually, the house that's right on Lake Shore Drive, it was a man cave. It's up for sale now?
The blue one,
Yes.
okay.
Now, it's up for sale. Is that gonna be a single-family home, or is that, didn't they pass that for a man cave only?
I can pull whatever approvals that it went through, but I can tell you it's listed as a one bed, one bath. And I took a look at the pictures today because one of the things I try and do is keep up on the housing trends, our housing prices going up, prices going down. So once a week I try and go through and look at what houses are selling for in the town, so I was able to take a look at it. It looked like the entire top level looked like a little mini putty area. So if anything was to happen, it would probably have to be renovated, which would again require a building permit. But I can pull previous approvals and see what it got approved for.
Okay. 'Cause I thought before it was just approved for like a man cave.
That's exactly right.
Yes, I'll have
The
to
house
take a
that was
look
on
at
the
that.
lake. All right, thanks.
Any other comments? Any more comments? Seeing none, we're adjourned.